Addiction never affects just the addict. It affects all of us. Recovering from addiction and alcoholism is also a life-changing battle for families dealing with a loved one's addiction. Numerous programs support addicts as they reclaim their lives, while their families face their own challenges without the same guidance. You're listening to Voices in Courage with KL Wells, where we transform the lives of the families and loved ones of addicts and alcoholics from surviving to thriving in the midst of chaos. Tune in as we highlight vulnerable stories of families who have addicted relatives and friends and learn how they have dealt with the challenges of isolation, desperation, and shame. If you are seeking ways to live your best life, then we welcome you into this safe space. Be a part of change today with your host, KL Wells.
Hi, here we are again. It's KL Wells with Voices in Courage. And this bi-week, I have an extraordinary guest that's joining us today, Dr. Kate Lund. And she's going to weave in her story kind of in the midst of our conversation. But I think you're in for a super treat. And we're going to really dive deep into peak performance, resiliency. My belief at this point in the world that we're living in right now is that our world is running faster than our brains are, and we're going to touch on that. And we are about, if we're not already in the storm of what is taking place right now geopolitically, with AI being, having emerged and now becoming a thing, and all the things that are swirling around. Arguably, this decade is going to be one of the biggest change decades of our entire lives, and it will rival the last change of the last 100 years. So this is a big reason to have this conversation, is how do you navigate and kind of thrive in the midst of the chaos of your life, the world that we're living in, if you're not skilled up at this point. And so Dr. Kate Lund is joining us today to give us some insights and her own journey of resiliency at a really high level, and what she's learned and what she coaches and trains and teaches. And so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Excellent. Well, KL, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah. And so, I've had a lifelong passion in this whole area of resilience, peak performance, as a result mostly of my own experiences growing up as a young child with a medical condition that had me in and out of the hospital, having to return to school, looking, feeling different, and just needing to find a way through those hard moments. And it didn't happen immediately, didn't happen overnight, but happened with time, but primarily with the support of my parents, my family, the parents of friends of mine. The fortunate event that one day I picked up a tennis racket and found that I loved tennis.
Okay.
And that became a lifelong passion, and really was at the foundation of how I built my sense of self and my strength despite the challenges.
Okay. So you've touched on a couple things that are really important to me. One is the physicality of our experience as a human, and that those kinds of things that we grab a hold of physically, that are our passions, really, I think, is one of the foundational pieces for our ability to thrive. So that's one piece. I backpack and hike. It's non-negotiable in my world. It keeps me sane. And so tennis for you, fantastic. And then the other piece too, that I want you to give some more airtime to is, obviously, I believe that 95% of our success or failure is directly determined by who we surround ourselves with, the community that we build. And I want people to understand that it's really important that you be choiceful about that community, that you just don't kind of wait for it to show up. So if you would speak to that piece.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's touch on the physicality piece first.
Great.
Because I think that I totally agree. I mean, that's integral to our ability to show up in the world, to maximize our potential within our own unique context, all of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was a young child, my sense of body integrity was really challenged at points, right? There were a lot of things that physically were hard for me. Physically, I actually couldn't do because it would mess with my equilibrium or what have you. But, in time and with the support, obviously, of those around me, I came to focus on the things I could do as
Right.
opposed to things I couldn't do. And
Right.
that has been immensely
Hmm.
important to me. And tennis
Yeah.
came into the mix. Non contact, became pretty good at it, actually, quite good at it, and really was at the cornerstone of my identity. And I think that having a sense of body integrity in that way within our own unique context. We can't do everything. We're not
Right.
all going to be able to, and there were a lot of things, that were difficult. But if we can focus on the things that we can do as opposed to
Hmm.
those that we can't, I think we're going to be in much better shape. And it's going to be really, really important in terms of maximizing potential long term.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's another huge thread to kind of pull is this whole notion of, are we trying to strengthen our weaknesses? Or are we looking for the strengths that already uniquely are designed? We all have a genius. We all have
Yeah.
strengths. And I mean, this is a big school of discussion,
Hmm.
certainly in business, but certainly in the world of addiction. And
Absolutely.
because we tend to focus on what's wrong with the addict. And
Right.
we're going to fix them,
Yeah.
which is a failed strategy and a failed paradigm. And then we give as a loved one, like I'm the mom of a recovering addict. And I really I chose to work really hard at not staying in the crisis of his disease,
Mhm.
but to be able to thrive in the midst of his disease.
Ah, yes, that is such an important point. I love that because what you're saying, I mean, you're really saying you're spot on, right? It's a lot of the work I do at this point with parents who have children who are struggling with, whether it be a language-based learning disability, sort of, a physical illness, a physical disability, what have you. I really work with parents to try to find what's right with their child. Of course, we have to manage through the challenges. We have to acknowledge and contend with the challenges because those are real, those are in front of us. But we've got to look beyond those also to find what's right with the child, what they can do, as opposed to what they can't do, where are their strengths that will then help them to circumvent the challenge that they're facing. And in your case, it's your son with the addiction, and what is he bringing to the table that will help him to circumvent the addiction, the challenge that, we're working with, but we need to look beyond that. So I love that point that you just made. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I've had a guest on that I absolutely adore. His name's Dr. Bill Crawford. He's out of Houston, and he wrote a book called Life from the Top of the Mind. And one of the things that he so eloquently talks about is we almost have to look beyond the addiction or beyond the affliction or beyond the thing that we're, quote, treating,
Yes.
to see beyond that to the honestly the magnificence of the spirit that is before us and the genius that inherently resides in that person, no matter what they're actually dealing with, and help by seeing that, help them begin to entertain the notion that that does in fact exist and to grow that more and more and more, so it becomes more the center point than the disease or the affliction or whatever it is that they're dealing with.
Absolutely. It's right. It's central to help folks, challenge or not, to see the possibility on the
Mhm,
other side of whatever it
mhm.
is they're dealing with. And
Right.
to then celebrate the small successes along the way as they move towards that possibility. And so that's key because oftentimes, human nature, we want to go from 0 to 60 all at once. But
Mhm.
change doesn't happen that way, right? Change is not a linear process. It's a circular process with a lot of stops and starts and sideways deviations and all of the things. And
Mhm.
so, really, to be able to take that step back and look at what's gone well and where have those small successes been and try to integrate those as we move towards that possibility,
Mhm.
so important.
Mhm. Mhm. And so then could you speak to the other side of the equation, which is the parents? Because I know, I grew up with a brother who was seriously ill as a young baby, basically, but it took up so much space in my household. And so I don't remember my parents like taking care of themselves. And I think I don't even know exactly where I got this notion that this was mission critical in
Mm.
dealing with my son's addiction, that I had to put my oxygen mask on first.
Absolutely spot on. Mission critical. I love that phrase. That's perfect. I mean, that really captures it. And,
Mhm.
so I'm actually writing a book as we speak on resilient parenting.
Awesome.
And at the foundation of this
Mhm.
book is this idea of how we as parents, I have 16-year-old twin boys, so I'm a parent too. And
Yeah.
so how we as parents are caring for ourselves and how that's incredibly vital in managing through and beyond the challenges that our kids are facing, big
Mhm.
or small. And so
Mhm.
yeah, for you with your son with significant challenges in the addiction domain,
Mhm.
absolutely mission critical to get your oxygen mask on first. And I'm constantly talking to folks about that. And where I start with folks, and I'm really curious about what's worked well for you and kind of what I know the backpacking and the physical outlets and such, but what
Mhm.
else is this idea of managing stress response
Yes.
and making that sort of a cornerstone of your routine? Because
Mhm.
if we're starting from sort of a modulated space and a
Mhm.
stressor hits, we might ride the wave, right? But
Right.
if we're starting up here and a
Mhm.
stressor hits and boom, we escalate to shutdown,
Mhm.
then we're not going to be able to help our kids. Our health, our wellness, our overall sense of self is going to suffer. So
Mhm.
absolutely, yeah, so vital. And
Yeah.
all the things to look at there are really important.
Yeah, and so this is where I geek out on the brain science.
I love it.
Is the whole, and from a simplistic perspective, brainstem versus, neocortex,
Uh-huh.
is I didn't want to constantly be in fight, flight, or freeze.
Right.
And
Right.
and partly because, well, that's just a crappy place to live. But I also knew that it was having a significant impact on my body.
Yeah.
And I did not want my body awash in cortisol and my immune system to be deteriorating in the midst of trying to navigate this disease. So that's part of this equation. But what I would say is stress response. So there's several things. I mean, I have a whole big regimen of things that I do. But what I would say is there's a body of work out there called Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Shamin. And that is actually a program that I adopted this year that is helping rewire my neural pathways for my resiliency reactions are much tighter now, much quicker, much stronger. I'm able to be aware and shift sometimes minutes versus a day. Or, like I joke now because somebody will say, well, I've had a bad day. And I'm like, seriously, you had a whole bad day? Like a whole bad day? So that's one thing. And in terms of rewiring for thriving in the midst of the
Yes.
chaos. And
Yes.
that is and so this too, and I think you'll appreciate this, is I have a clarity of intention about thriving that again is non-negotiable.
Hmm. Okay. Absolutely. That makes sense. And say
Yeah.
say more about that. I'm really curious.
Well, when we first became aware that Sam was in serious trouble with this addiction, and reached out to some other sources, it became pretty clear that people were in crisis mode or they wanted to just survive this. And
Hmm.
I was like, no, I certainly don't want to stay in crisis, but I'm not just about surviving this.
Right.
I actually want to thrive in the midst of this because I have this great life. I mean, I have a great marriage, I have great friends, I have great business, all these things. And Sam's this one bubble in all these other bubbles. And I was like, I'm not going to give up my entire power or my life to that one bubble.
Yes, that makes all the sense in the world. And
Okay.
yeah, that's exactly, what I work with people on as well, to not let that challenge, whatever that might be, however big
Mm-hmm.
it might be, to define them, to define their life and
Mm-hmm.
experience, to
Mm-hmm.
find ways to thrive despite it is so important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So tell our audience a little bit about what are some suggestions or coaching that you give to clients that are parents of children that are dealing with something in terms of their own self-care, their own potential thriving in the midst of dealing with whatever they're dealing with.
Right. So, in the big picture, it
Mm-hmm.
might sound counterintuitive, but we want parents to step
Mm-hmm.
away from the chaos, to step
Mm-hmm.
out of the intensity. Not all the time, but for
Sure.
sure in moments, multiple moments during the course
Y-
of the day.
Yeah.
So always start with folks to build a regime, build a routine around managing their stress response. There's no one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that'll look like mindful breathing. Maybe it'll look like meditation. Maybe it'll look like, jumping on the Peloton every morning or
Mm-hmm.
taking a 3-mile walk through the neighborhood, maybe even just a walk around the block. It all depends on
Mm-hmm.
who the person is and where they're starting from.
Mm-hmm.
So, managing that stress response at a foundational level is so important. And
Mm-hmm.
then finding areas of passion, as
Mm-hmm.
you've sort of mentioned, things
Mm-hmm.
that you can do as a parent to kind of bolster your sense of yourself. And
That's
that's
great.
really going to add to your ability to be happy and to thrive despite the challenge that's swirling around.
Mm-hmm.
Social support, and you mentioned that as well, having
Mm-hmm.
great friends and such, so
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm.
So connecting with folks, maybe, calling a friend at some point that you haven't talked to in a while, grabbing a cup of coffee with a friend, anything that allows you to connect outside of yourself, outside of the challenge,
Mm-hmm.
talking about things beyond the challenge. We don't always have to be rehashing the hard stuff in our life, sort of
Right.
thinking about what's going well as opposed to what's not going well. And we've got a great exercise that I use with a lot of folks in my coaching called the daily wins exercise. And
Great. I love it.
it's essentially, at the end of each day, sitting down and thinking about 3 to 5 things that went well on that given day. Because as human nature leads us to the things that didn't go well, leads us to think
Right.
about what we should have done, what we could have done.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we so this or that? But no, like, put that aside for a little bit and focus on the things that did go well and keep a running list, so you can
Mm-hmm.
refer back. And it's
Mm-hmm.
a really, really helpful exercise with kids as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of parents doing this with their kids, and they can keep,
Great.
their own versions of the list. So that's really important. And then, nutrition, sleep, all of these
Mm-hmm.
things
Right.
to try to
Mm-hmm.
dial those things in because, parenting is exhausting in and of itself.
Yes, it
And
is.
so we've got to maintain that foundation with or without challenge.
Mm-hmm. So those are all well, just spot on. What I routinely will ask parents is, how are you sleeping? Because for me, it's one of the top 3 things that are most important. If you're not sleeping, you're not restoring. And so helping people get back to restorative sleep as a
Mhm.
baseline, that's one thing. And then what I loved about the daily wins, because I was also thinking about gratitude. I mean, gratitude has so
Ah,
many benefits
yes.
that go with it; it's ridiculous. But that falls kind of in that category. And what I love about the daily wins is, and capturing them, is you just keep stacking them. And
Yes.
stacking wins is, psychologically, in my world, super important, because we tend to focus on the things that didn't go right, or we messed up, or blah blah blah. We tend to stack those instead of the wins, or the joys, or the things that brought us a smile, or those kinds of things. And so stacking them in my world is like super important too.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And so stacking wins. And then also this notion of, you mentioned gratitude, because there's so much power in gratitude. So,
Mm-hmm.
sort of alongside a parallel process to the daily wins is really thinking each day about the things that we're grateful for,
Yeah.
within the context of our world. And that's another great one to do with our kids. And
Mm-hmm.
what this does is it really fosters sort of an inherent sense of optimism. And
Mm-hmm.
optimism, I
Mm.
believe, is a really important pillar of resilience, a resilient outlook, a resilient mindset, just being resilient in general.
Oh, say more.
Yeah, and so, well, it's one of the pillars of the resilient child and soon to be the resilient parent that I outlined in my first book, Bounce: Help Your Child Build Resilience and Thrive in School, Sports, and Life. And
Cool.
optimism was one of the pillars that I wrote about because, in my own sort of lived experience, as well as watching my kids grow up, as well as my 20+ years of clinical experience working with hundreds of people coming to the table with various challenges and issues,
Mhm.
optimism and that ability to see the possibility on the other side of the challenge is
Mhm.
so key. I mean, I've seen it
Right.
time and time again, anecdotally, as well as in the research. There's a lot of research out there, particularly in the positive psychology domain and
Mhm.
otherwise,
Mhm.
about the power of optimism. And
Mhm.
so, gratitude, focusing on the things that did go well as opposed to just the things that we're struggling with really
Mhm.
helps to build our sense of optimism. And I personally believe it's vital.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. And so what I'm thinking about is, what do you do with a parent who this is also kind of tied to addiction, but I've had parents say to me, "What is there to be optimistic about? My son or daughter or my friend or my spouse, has a potentially life-threatening disorder. They could die at any moment. And so what is like, how can I even remotely thrive? That seems silly. That's using a kind word. Or how can I be optimistic? Do you ever
Right.
run into people that are like, well, that's not even possible?
Sure, absolutely, because it's where they are in that moment, right?
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
understandable. They're really mired in the challenge, and it's understandable how one could get there and how one could get stuck there. And so
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
first piece there is really trying to understand in an authentic human way where that parent, where that person is coming from, and try to really understand their experience. And
Hmm.
then over time, it's definitely not a one size fits all, and it's definitely not a we can push a button to make this happen type of thing.
Right.
But to help to then co-construct, uncover some of the things that they aren't able to in that moment when they're saying, well, there's nothing to be optimistic about here. I'm just no, but uncovering over time the small wins, the small glimmers of hope, the
Hmm.
small pieces within them that are going
Hmm.
well, helping them to connect with things that drive passion and happiness outside of the challenge, that sort of thing. Very, very important. But again, not a one size fits all, and a
Right.
process that has to evolve over time.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too that I found is I routinely ask permission. In my earlier days, I just used to think, well, if they just knew,
Right.
they would do it differently, or that they wanted to know. And I realized, no, not everybody wants to know. And quite frankly, not everybody wants to do it differently. So I had to, I think, learn to put my agenda aside and re-examine my own beliefs about this, because that's who I am. It's like, oh, that new information, let's, and not everybody wants to do that. So do you find yourself in that place too, where you're kind of asking permission, you're kind of poking around to see, like, what are the possibilities here that we could take a little toehold on and build from?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's all part of, exploring the experience of the other person, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, I find that in my work, my lived experience is sort of in the background as sort of a framework, but I never, put my own experience up front such that,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. It's sort of it's separate, but it's a guide in the back of my mind. But really it comes down to understanding where somebody is,
Mm-hmm.
where they are in the change process, maybe sort of helping them through discussion, through, one technique is motivational interviewing, which sort of uncovers the process, helps somebody engage in the process of change over time. And, that's a piece that I use a lot, but really important to let folks embrace or engage in the process of change at their own pace, right? Because as coaches, as therapists, we can never force the
Right.
process of change because change has to come from the inside out.
So, man, as you said that, what I thought about was how inherently foundational trust is.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
that's huge. Trust is
mhm,
huge. And
mhm,
trust will be built out of that initial alliance that we have with the person that we're working with. And
mhm,
so, really, helping them to see you as coming to the work with the desire to understand their experience on a human level and to understand how hard things are in this moment, that sort of thing, and sort of co-constructing the change process from there.
Are you getting to work with a lot of parents that have children that are dealing with diseases or challenges or whatever, and then really kind of focus on helping the parents kind of get their lives back, so to speak?
Exactly. That's the bulk of my work at this point.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Working with the parents around, because the thing is, as the parents are dialing in their own self-care plan, their own
Hmm.
foundation, the kind of ideas that they're passing along to their children,
Right.
are helping
Right.
their kids become more resilient in the process. So
Hmm.
absolutely. So
Hmm.
there's a bit of a parallel process, but I'm working directly with the parents. Yes.
Okay. Okay. And so the other thing that routinely comes up in the world that I live in, but we just happen to be walking through different doors, but
Yeah.
but one of the things that routinely comes up, and this comes, and I coach parents too, in terms of, if you can teach your kids to ask for help,
Yes.
you have created a habit of behavior that is countercultural, and will serve them at an ordertude of magnitude that you don't begin to know at this point.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, because the ability to advocate for self, and ask
Mm-hmm.
for help when
Mm-hmm.
needed is so vital. And it's not something that comes naturally or easily to many people. So yeah,
Right.
coaching folks on the importance of that is very, very important. And helping parents to model that, to actually
Mm-hmm.
model all of these things that we're working on
Mm-hmm.
building for the parents, to model that for the kids is really,
Mm-hmm.
really powerful.
Absolutely. And because that's who the kids are looking at.
Exactly, exactly. And watching so much more than we even recognize, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, I have said, assuming Sam comes out the other side of a rehab, and he's been in multiple rehabs at this point and multiple recoveries at this point, but I wanted to be a healthy parent when he
Right.
popped out the other side. I wanted to
Yes.
have done my work while he was doing his work.
Yes, absolutely. And that is so powerful, right? Because you're modeling for him the importance of doing the work from the inside out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you
Mm-hmm.
were just sort of standing on the sideline saying, "Well, it's your problem. I'm here to support you," but not
Mm-hmm.
nearly as effective, right? But you're doing your own work. You're going through your own process of strengthening and change. And I mean, it's the most powerful support that you can give to a child who's struggling.
Yeah, yeah. Do you get into discussions with your parents about, the way that I think about the world is that there's always gifts and lessons embedded in every experience. And so through Sam's journey, I've grabbed a hold of these really painful, drop to your knees, losing it moments as an opportunity for me to rise to another level of consciousness, actually, and another level of peak performance as a human, and
Yes.
to actually stretch what I understood my beliefs to be and re-examine them. And all there's so many things there. Do you get to the point with your parents where you are able to have discussions around, really truly, what are the gifts and lessons embedded in this journey?
It depends. Again, not a one size fits all in
Mm-hmm.
any of the work that I'm doing, really. There are instances where that has happened because folks have sort of come out on the other side of the challenge, or they have, developed a newfound passion in something, whether it be a sport or taken up running as an outlet, and then end up
Mm-hmm.
going on to do, marathons, or,
Mm-hmm.
improving their time in something, or
Mm-hmm.
starting to compete in triathlon, that kind of a thing. So at that point, that kind of a discussion, very well might arise.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know that I've ever asked one of my guests this before, but I am super curious as to, what was the moment that you knew that this was your life's work?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I think unconsciously it was quite early. So when I was back in, I think it was middle school, fifth grade or so, I was convinced I was going to be a pediatrician. That was sort of my thing. I was
Mm-hmm.
really, really excited about it. And
Mm-hmm.
then I had quite a significant medical setback where I was out of school for months and months and months, and really got behind in math and kind of off track and came back, and they were like, well, and so somehow developed these self-limiting beliefs around math and science. And all of a sudden I defined myself as not good at those things. Who knows if that was even true, but that was sort of a trend that followed me through the rest of my schooling, actually, through graduate school. Even should have seen what happened in statistics, but it's a whole nother story.
I have a similar story.
But somewhere within there, I, really kind of focused more on the behavioral sciences, particularly when I got to high school, and also finding ways to give back. I was really, really excited about animals, and I spent tons of time caring for my dogs and, making sure that they were okay. And that sort of translated into volunteering at the hospital. And really that behavioral science path clicked in. And I did that very squarely all the way through college, graduated with a degree in psychology, but wasn't ready to go back to graduate school, even though I knew long term the work that I wanted to do, because I think it was embedded from early on. So I went off and I worked in, entertainment, public relations, communications, doing publicity for a few TV shows, and came out of it thinking, all right, not getting the meaning that I really need in my work here. It's time to go back and do this other thing. And at that point, I never looked back, and really focused all of my graduate training in psychology on, I'm trained as a child psychologist, even though I'm doing mostly adult work now, but working within major medical settings with kids and families, trying to help them create that new sense of normal on the other side of a diagnosis or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a tangential answer, but it goes way back. The knowledge or my understanding or my sense of what I was, meant to do.
I think my story would be that that's probably true for a lot of people who have consciously evolved to their calling, is that those threads were way back when. And then in retrospect, we can kind of see how the dots might be connected.
Yes.
When we don't necessarily see them when those dots are happening. Yeah. So one thing that you said that I think was important from my perspective was the pets piece. And I think, there's a lot to be said, obviously, for pet therapy, hippotherapy. All kinds of things. And there's an unconditional love that goes with having a pet.
Yes.
That is, I think, transcends other ways of healing.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And so I've got a few examples on the pet front.
Great.
Back when I was a child, I had a dog, an Airedale named Peanut, and Peanut was like everything to me. And I worried about Peanut, and I wanted to make sure she was okay. And I would spend hours sitting with her outside and then there was one point where she was sick, and I actually did go down and sleep with her in the garage. My mom made the dog sleep in the garage. Yes, this is true. Not like in today's world where they're, everywhere.
Yeah.
But that was sort of the foundation, right? And so dogs have been a central facet of my life ever since. And so just recently, I trained and certified my 2-year-old Brittany Doodle, Wally, to be a therapy dog. Wally, he's a good boy.
I love the name.
Yeah, he's a good boy, and he looks like a Wally too.
Yeah. Okay.
And we go out to an assisted living facility twice a month, and we visit a group of seniors there in the activity room at 11. And it's amazing. The word has gotten out that this is the Friday that Wally's coming, and last week there were 40 people in the room. It had started with like 15, 10. And anyway, so Wally is a hit there, and it's very, very sweet. It's very heartwarming, actually, the way Wally will go around. I take him around the circle, and he gives each and every person his paw, and they rub his ears, and they do so much power in that. And my hope is to get Wally out into some of the children's hospitals here. Have to do some specific training related to that, but that's a goal, because I do think that there's so much power in what animals can bring to those who are facing a challenge or suffering.
Oh, most definitely. And you have your own story.
Yeah.
as to how
Right.
Peanut was so, I think Peanut was like mission critical for you. One of the pieces to your ability to access your vibrancy and your optimism and your own resilience.
Absolutely. Yes.
Hmm.
Peanut was foundational. Peanut was everything. Absolutely. Peanut had birthday parties and birthday cakes and birthday hats and yeah.
That's awesome. That's great. So the another thing that I'm thinking about in terms of things that people can do for resiliency is I talk about laughing buddies. Is I think
Yes.
if and that and for me it's kind of an intentional thing too, is I have one friend who I just call and I can laugh with. And I may create, like, there have been moments certainly through all of this with Sam that I have said, okay, this is a safety zone and Sam isn't allowed in today,
Right. Yeah. And
you know?
that goes back to that idea of connecting with folks, just purely connecting with them and not bringing the challenge or the hard things
Hmm.
in those
Right.
moments. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the power of laughter. So I'm trying to think. Oh, I know another thing relative to the self-care is we're not all that great at it either, in terms of the feelings piece of things.
Right. Yeah. And to really yeah. So the idea of self-awareness and sort of
Hmm.
what are the things that we're feeling,
Hmm.
what might be in the way of us connecting on some of these other levels, that sort of
Hmm.
thing. Because
Hmm.
oftentimes we want to sort of push through those, pretend they don't exist, stuff
Right.
them away, all that stuff, not
Hmm.
necessarily entirely healthy. So,
Hmm.
perhaps journaling or taking some time each day to think through, well, what are some of those emotions, what are some of those hard feelings that might have me bogged down at this point, and how might, and sometimes just writing that stuff out can be very powerful and can help create that path then for moving forward.
Well, I'm sure, the way that I think about peak performance is when we're bogged down by our emotional stuff, it's
Mm.
like trying to row across the lake while we have the anchor in the water.
Right, exactly. It's like walking through mud backwards. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
exact thing,
Mhm.
precisely. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, some of this sort of, working those thoughts and feelings through on a cognitive level, really, really helpful, really important. And then starting though with that foundational sort of stress modulation, whether it be through meditation or deep breathing, or just having some sort of a practice that helps you kind of start from that level space.
So, okay, so I'm going to jump over here.
Sure, sure, of course.
um, so what I'm thinking about is your podcast, the Optimized Mind, which I just love the title.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, can you speak to the intention of your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So the optimized mind, and it's a super fun project, by the way. I love doing the podcast. So the big idea with the podcast is that we're looking at resilience from a human perspective. So I'm interviewing folks across domains, corporate, entrepreneur, athletes, parents. There's always been sort of a challenge of some sort involved, and looking at, what they're out there, what folks are out there in the world doing, what they're bringing to the table, how they've moved through and beyond their particular challenges, developing a resilient mindset, a resilient lifestyle, a resilient outlook. And it looks different for, there's some core pieces that, similarities, threads that come out between folks in interviews, but all of our stories look different, right? So it's really looking at how folks have created this sense of resilience within their own unique context. And that's really what I'm hoping to capture with the podcast in an authentic and human way.
And it's so valuable to have those kinds of stories out there, is because, again, we're not trained in what resiliency is or how to embody it or how to, do it. And I think this would be my story right now for sure. And I don't think it's ever going to change, is that resiliency, the skill set of resiliency is a mission critical skill set to navigate humanity.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, as you mentioned at the outset, the world is a bit topsy turvy at this point. And so
Mhm.
the more resilient we can all be, in moving forward, the better off we'll be.
Yeah. And so, do you have kind of like the top three things that you speak to in terms of resiliency?
Well, so you mean how to build resiliency, how to become as resilient as possible?
Yeah.
Yeah. So really the top thing is the managing your stress response and finding a way that works for you in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that starts with that idea of stepping away, stepping out of the chaos,
Mm-hmm.
taking a broader look at the challenge that's in front of you. So that's
Mm-hmm.
that's a big piece. Social support is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I would say, the number two piece. And
Mm-hmm.
then really cultivating and fostering your sense of optimism, your sense of
Okay.
gratitude is
Mm-hmm.
really, really important. So those, I would say, would be the top three.
Okay, super. So I want to take the first one, and because I think it's still very much a what thing for a lot of people to think that you actually have agency over your stress response.
Right.
You are
Yeah.
not captive or hijacked by it necessarily. Most people are hijacked by it, but you actually have agency over your stress response. So could you speak a little bit more to that, the agency of?
Right. Well, so yeah, it's really important. I mean, because we do, in fact, have agency over it. It's just that, oftentimes we get hijacked because
Mhm.
we're moving so fast, we're not stopping to think, I'm really stressed out. And there are all these things that are like swirling around. And yeah, I'm still really stressed out, even though I'm more stressed out. So
Mhm.
it's taking that step back and really intentionally creating a routine, a foundation for
Mhm.
yourself and developing a plan, and so
Mhm.
mindfulness meditation, there are a lot of techniques out there, really, really effective. Sometimes folks will want to, integrate sort of longer meditations into their day to day, but really the
Mhm.
key is this can be done in just a few minutes a day,
Right. Mhm.
in 2-minute increments, 2-minute
Mhm.
spurts.
Mhm.
And there's a really great method out there designed by a physician. Sadly, he's no longer alive, but Herbert Benson, a wonderful physician from Boston, who was a cardiologist who developed something called the relaxation response in the 70s.
Hmm.
And essentially, his colleagues, at Harvard Medical School laughed at him like, what do you
Sure.
mean, mind,
Yeah.
body? That's nuts. You're crazy.
Right. Right.
Really, he stuck with it, did all this research. I mean, it's a huge, huge program. It's the mind body, it become the cornerstone of the mind body medicine program at Mass General Hospital. And he has a wonderful technique called the relaxation response that I often recommend to folks, which
Mhm.
it incorporates breathing and focusing on a word, and, doing that for 5 to 7 minutes at a time, and can be
Mhm.
really, really powerful. Some folks prefer the longer meditations, some
Mhm.
folks prefer walking out in nature. Some folks
Mhm.
prefer being on the Peloton, but it's developing that routine. It's developing
Right.
something that works for you is the really is the key thing.
Yeah. And so this is my belief. I'm checking in with you.
Sure.
Is that we have these thoughts that are bouncing around our head. I don't know, 85,000 thoughts a day. Usually we're just rerunning thoughts all the time. And so paying attention to what the thoughts are that are running through our head. Because I
Hmm.
remember this was a number of years ago, I had a thought running through my head and I was like, okay, so is that my thought? Like it didn't square with who I thought I was. And I was like, as soon as I said it out loud, I was
Yeah.
like, no, that isn't actually my thought. And so I think about the pool of thoughts,
Hmm.
and that we kind of swim in the pool of our family's thoughts, our community's thoughts, our school thoughts, all of that. And it's like, oh, so do I actually need to? Well, there's a distinction. Is that mine or not? But actually to examine your thoughts, and then to figure out, oh, am I going to actually pick that thought up? Or am I just going to let that one lay?
Exactly. That is so important. And it comes back to that idea of awareness, right? And
Mm-hmm.
really thinking about what we're thinking about. And and
Mm-hmm.
and we're oftentimes, folks aren't doing that or aren't able to do that because they're moving so quickly, so
Mm-hmm.
fast through life.
Right.
And then
Mm-hmm.
that snowball of stress
Mm-hmm.
is coming and
Mm-hmm.
coming and coming. So
Yeah.
taking that step back and intentionally looking at and examining our thoughts, particularly those that are recurring, is
Mm-hmm.
so important because, as you mentioned, many of our thoughts don't serve us well, but yet
Right.
they're recurring. And
Mm-hmm.
so that then serves to bog us down in a really kind of stressful, non productive space.
Mm-hmm.
So, if we're able to identify those thoughts that aren't serving us well And if we're able to let them go, easier said than done. But oftentimes, if we have a mindful breathing practice or something along those lines, becomes a bit easier to let some of those thoughts go.
Yeah. Well, or in my world, one of the thoughts is that Sam could die any moment. I could get that phone call any moment. And I think that is, for parents, that potentially can be an ominous thought that we just carry around with us that kind of eats away at our soul. And to be able to almost let that thought float away.
Right.
And really not give it that kind of energy, and to then create a thought that does give us energy.
Yes. Yes, that's huge. That's a very powerful idea, right? And it's spot on, really. It's easier said than done. And again, it takes a great deal of awareness and ability to go there and be there and recognize that thought, because the thought for parents that they could get the phone call any moment that their child has died or something along those lines is so emotionally powerful, so hard, could really get somebody very, very stuck and not be able to. But with the awareness that you have, with the ability to take that step back, really, really so powerful and so important. But a process for sure to get there. And I'm sure for you that's been a process to get there to that point.
Yeah, and it's a continued process, and I
Yes.
keep accessing tools and all the things to rewire my neural pathways of how I
Yes.
have been habitually thinking, feeling, and behaving, the ways that don't serve me. I mean, and
Yes.
yes, of course, in the addiction space, the potentiality of the phone call is inherent, but there's nothing we can do about it for the
Right.
most part. And worrying about it in my world gives energy to something that I don't want to give energy to.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I'd much rather give my energy to the bright and light son that I have, and
Mhm.
imagining, him popping out the other side of his recovery.
Yes, absolutely. And that's huge, right? And
Mm-hmm.
not only helps you to thrive in these
Mm-hmm.
moments, but also helps him to thrive in these
Mm-hmm.
moments. And
Right.
so I love that point. That's just so powerful. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, whoa, we're kind of run up against the edge of our time together. Wow, this has been a really great conversation. So many great points. And what I'd like to say for our audience is, obviously we live in the world of addiction and substance abuse disorder and alcoholism and so on and so forth. But it doesn't really matter. All these things that we've talked about today are absolutely mission critical for us as parents, friends, spouses to navigate this world. There hasn't been anything that we've touched on that hasn't translated to this world.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And again, it's like, a lot of these principles of resilience, a lot of the principles of being at our best within our own unique context, they translate across domains.
Yeah. And I think too that I have seized the opportunity embedded in this journey with Sam's addiction to skill up,
Mhm.
to rewire, to create more moments of joy, a
Yes.
more vibrant life.
Yeah.
And so for me, I identify that as one of the major gifts out of the experience of Sam's addiction is my taking a hold of my own life at a higher level.
I love that. And that, yeah, and that I can't tell you how powerful that is, KL, and to be in that place and to be doing it and to be living it. It's amazing. It's wonderful.
Yeah. So I'm imagining that, obviously your work is also to help parents rise.
Yes.
Hmm.
Absolutely. That's
Hmm.
exactly what I'm hoping to do with each and every
Hmm.
person that I work with. Absolutely.
Yeah. So again, wow, just deep gratitude for this conversation and who you are in the world and the work that you're doing. If people do want to reach out to you, how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. So the best way is through my website, which is www.katelundspeaks.com. And folks can contact me through there and
Hmm.
I'll contact them right back. And I'd love to connect.
Great. Awesome. So is there any last thought that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, I think the last thought would be, what I really always encourage folks to do is keep their eye on that possibility on the other side of the challenge.
Awesome. Fantastic. And we'll end with
Wonderful.
that.
Thank you so much, Kale, for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Have a great day. Great day to our audience. Live an inspired life.
Thank you for joining us in this episode. We hope this discussion gives you the empowerment you need during these challenging times. Remember, there is always light after darkness. For more inspiring conversations like this one, subscribe to the show at voicesencourage.com/podcast. We encourage you to share with your friends and family going through similar situations so we can continue to build a strong community of hope and possibility. Start your life-changing journey today. Join our community at voicesencourage.com.